Morning, motivators. Boy, do I have something for your mind, body, and soul today. It's going to be a great conversation between myself and retired Command Master Chief James Parlier. I am so honored to have him on. He is somebody that I've admired for doggone almost my whole career. He was the Command Master Chief on board USS Cole on October 12th, 2000, when it was attacked by Al Qaeda. And through the last 23 years, I've gotten to know him. I was a command master chief myself, so in through that network, I got to know him. And in fact, I actually had a friend on board the Cole, which is one of the reasons I reached out to him, because we had that connection and some pretty good stories, our own stories about Andrew Triplett, each that are separate but the same, if you will. So a little bit about him. He started off in the Navy in 1978 as I think he was undesignated, decided to go corpsman, and he spent a very, it was a very colorful time for him in the Navy. He actually had a lot of experience. The Cole wasn't his first time uh, facing combat. He actually was with the 24th MEU with the Marine Corps in 1983 after the Beirut bombing. So he went into support after that, where we lost 275 Marine soldiers and sailors. He was also on board the USS, I think it was Leadership, which is ironic, if you will. Right after the USS Tripoli, he was with the USS Tripoli when it hit a mine, and they narrowly missed a mine themselves. And then again on board USS Cole. He's had a lot of leadership as a command master chief. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to James Parlier. Hey, James, how you doing?
Good. Staying warm down here in North Carolina, so
I'm staying warm
that's
up
a
here
good
in
thing.
Ohio.
You're a little bit colder than us, then. So.
Yeah. So it's great to have you. I initially reached out to you and I said, hey, let's talk about grit. Let's talk, because I really think that people today could really take something out of a conversation between two leaders about grit, especially in your experience. And you said, hey, let's just let the conversation go where it will. And I love that idea, because that's really what Leadership Jam Session is about. So let me start with one thing. Let's talk about your time as a doc, because whether it doesn't matter the service that you're in, there's a lot of love for the Navy corpsman. There's a lot of history with the Navy corpsman. But I want to read something that you actually have on your Together We Serve, which I just love how deep your Together We Serve profile is. But you wrote here, a Vietnam combat Marine once wrote this about Navy corpsmen who they trusted and admire. A doc is someone you can count on. He's someone in your platoon that when something happens to one of our fellow Marines, you can call on him and not have to worry. He's your buddy, a comrade in arms, a person who you count on to cover your back, to lay down fire, dig fighting holes, or do whatever the hell Marines are doing. That's who a doc is. Tell me about that. I love that, because I'll be honest with you, that's what I believe a shipmate is. That's what I believe a friend is. And I don't know, I guess that's just what we end up growing up knowing as people who serve. So tell me about your time as a doc and what that means to you.
I think back in those days in the 1980s, for me, it was awakening up being with the Marine Corps, because they truly do have a esprit de corps. It's set in stone. I mean, the example of learning where you're from, the traditions, the honor. That was my first probably interface with serious pride and professionalism. And as you've probably met other Marine corpsmen, some of them are like Marines. I mean, that's how serious they take it. And you worked on an amphib, so you've probably ran into those Marine corpsmen as well as working with the Marine Corps. So they have their own unique way of leading, but their business is also serious, and it grew me up real quick. And to meet that standard, like you said, of becoming a doc and being called that and earning that, gave me a lot of pride. And even today, to be able to say that with my fellow docs and Marines, that I earned that. through trial and tribulation, whether it was out there getting initiated by learning how to put a hooch up because you didn't know what the hell you were doing. And then when they had a initiation, which I'll share with you, where you had to take my cover off, and they had the E-tool, which they put at a 90-degree angle. And then we had, I'm so old, we had C-rat cans in, all right? Some of those folks out there don't know what those are. They're just like cans that carry SpaghettiO or whatever, but they were actually rations in a can that we would eat it. And they were from the 1950s. But yeah, they still ate that stuff. And this is 83, 82 and 83, 1982, 83. And so they take the lid off the can and put it on the ground, and you take that 90-degree angle E-tool and try to hit it unblindfolded. And then they blindfold you. And so you're trying to hit it blindfold, and they go, "Go, Doc, go. You almost got it. And then they're all laughing. You go, what the hell are they laughing about? And lo and behold, you take off your blindfold, and there's your cover with holes all in it. They replaced the lid with your cover. So, but, it was stuff like that really made you feel, even though you're pissed off you lost your cover, but you felt like part of the team, that you earned your way in. You knew these guys were treating you like one of their own. Mm-hmm. And boy, that really did make a lot of difference. And even today, we try to fit in as sailors as well into our commands and figure out what, how important my part is. And one of the things I've always told corpsmen growing up, even if they're running health records, which was a shitty job, believe me, filing shits and whatnot, is your job's important, because like for the health records guys, even in the hospital, the first person that a patient would see was that health records tech. And they set the tone for that patient for the rest of the day. So, my message always to the sailors was, no matter how menial you think your job it is it a key part of what's going on in this ship or in this command. So, that's always important. And I'm sure you've done the same thing to reinstill how important people are on that ship, whether they're sweeping the decks for sweepers, whatever the case.
Actually, I want to take it a step further, because it's something, and I had a conversation with another command master chief this morning. He actually said to me the toughest thing he ever did in the Navy was transition to be a civilian. And I am streaming this live onto LinkedIn as well. So, how did you, and we'll get into the things that you experienced while you're on active duty. I really want to talk about the COLE, but, jumping forward to the end of your career, how was that transition for you? Because I know for me, it's been a year. Literally a year ago this weekend, I moved into the home I'm sitting in, and it has been whirlwind, and it's been tough. And I think he had a point when he said one of the toughest things he ever did in the Navy was transition. So how was it for you as a combat veteran? How was it for you to transition from a sailor to a civilian?
Well, depending on your age when you get out, that maturity level plays in. Mm-hmm. And I had this, we were talking earlier about being deck plate master chiefs and just telling it like it is. Well, I had 5 jobs before I finally figured it out. And he's right. It's really tough especially when you've held an executive level job, that's hard to describe to a civilian out here in what you do. At least in my time, I should say, your day-to-day activities and how you would fit in. And then one of the key things I found out, and I don't know if it still applies today with people getting out, with especially senior leadership, but it seems that one of the jobs I had, the more info you shared, it seemed the more threatened people felt about you taking their job or taking their position, which, for us Navy, info sharing is what makes it happen.
Right.
But I found out in Civil Ant Fleet that that's not the case. That a lot of people took that as a threat. That, hey, that guy may know more than me, or is trying to work their way up politically, which was never the case for me. I was just trying to help the team. But, you find out some companies out there, it isn't always just about the team.
Right.
It becomes a somewhat of an I world instead of the E in team. And I think that too was and I know that too was a very difficult transition for me in that aspect. But I think it's why I wound up driving semis for a little while. Of course, I wanted to do it because I could, because with retirement pay and all, I was fine. And it's something I always wanted to try, but I respect those guys, man. I'd never do it again because driving alone solo, it's a very lonely job. And they just don't make enough money, I think, for what they do out there even today, I'm sure, because of the dangers and it's a tough world working
Yeah.
there.
Truckers are definitely unsung heroes. I think the pandemic really opened our eyes to the types of jobs that are so important to society in order for things to continue to run. You know, the trades, the skilled trades, or the folks like truckers, the supply chain. If one part of it breaks down, farmers, we know how important they are, but we tend to kind of forget how important those jobs are and keeping our society clicking along, for sure. And
But
I think, go ahead.
yeah, what I found out worked for me though, and I think it works out for a lot of sailors that retire at our level, is working directly or indirectly with the Navy again. And in my case, I got a security job for about 5.5 years, basically as a regional manager working for a retired Air Force security general. But we had 6 bases under us, Navy bases. And so I was actually indirectly and directly able to still work with sailors and civilians that were sailors or military. And to me, I found myself in that happy place again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I totally get it. Last night, same command master chief I was talking to this morning. I was telling him about my happy place, and that's what I'm doing with Motivate with is to my happy place is going to be working with people and developing people. I really am looking forward to doing some personal training with young people, doing some motivational speaking and volunteering at schools and talking to kids and just being involved with the future of who's going to protect our country and helping people achieve those dreams. And it was the reason I'm where I am today is because someone got me into the Navy. In fact, I talked to my recruiter last night. I'm going to give him a call this afternoon. It's going to be great to talk to him. He recruited me over 30 years ago, and I'm very, very excited to have a conversation with him. But that's my happy place. That's my wheelhouse. Is RTC Great Lakes was 6 years of my naval career, and I found an absolute passion for developing civilians into sailors. And now I just want to help develop people and help them achieve their goals. So that's you nailed it.
It makes sense because that's your strength, and that's a strong skill set in you. And I'm glad that you found that because it's important to find that. For me, it's the speaking engagements. I would never have thought 23 years later, I'm still out here being asked to do speaking engagements. And I don't charge.
Right.
I mean, people pay to get me there and put me up, but I don't, unlike my old captain, he's got to make a dime. But I feel that the lessons learned from COLE are still important, and to speak on behalf of the Gold Star families and the survivors and what we dealt with. And until that day where I'm not asked anymore or something else comes up, God forbid, with the histories going on today, I'll continue to do it because it keeps me strong. And then same thing for going down to the trials. People ask me, why the hell are you still going down there? And you've been going, 15 years? Yeah, 15 years. I've been going down there. And some of the COLE survivors will tell you, as well as Gold Star family members that I go down with, we want to sit in that gallery, letting the judge, whoever that may be out there, and the commissions know we're not going away. That we want to see justice served, even with one guy, the only one left now alive in the COLE case, get his justice. And believe me, it's been rough. You talk about the grit thing. That takes some grit, brother. There's days I just want to give up, that I'm sick and tired of it, but it's the prosecution team that keeps me going. It's been there for years. We have had some of them rotate out, but we've got a lot of members still with that team that have been there forever. And we strengthen each other. They see us. We recharge them every time we go down there. And those things are very important. And again, for me, it's important. I don't care if he gets death, or at this point, or life, but I want to just see the trial end.
Yeah.
That's the main thing. And
Well, let's talk about the fuel that's kept you going. I'm going to put this slideshow up like we discussed. So for the younger crew, or for those that, we talked about it earlier, James, is that for you and I, obviously, I was at RTC Great Lakes as a drill instructor, recruit division commander in 2000 when this happened. And the war on terror started October 12th, 2000 for us. Many, it was 9/11, and that's okay. But for the Navy, I think as a whole, we know when it started. This is the USS Cole in her glory, out there ready to kick some ass. And man, I love the DDGs. They are, to me, they're the sports car of the Navy. They have all the bells and whistles. They can go fast, and when called upon, they can deliver tons of firepower on time, on target, and kick the dog shit out of our enemy. And I served on a USS Barry, and it's one of, again, just a great ship to be on. And
when we were doing the workups, little did we know that Al Qaeda was doing theirs too. They were training to attack an American warship, and that was after the embassy attacks in Africa. When we retaliated to the training sites in Afghanistan, Osama bin Laden, basically he declared fatwa or war on our Navy, and he was bound and determined that he was going to take a Navy ship out. And this last year, being down in Gitmo, we've covered more than we did in the last 10. We got to see all the players that got their names. We had testimony from the FBI, NCIS, from the interrogators that actually interrogated these guys at the Black Ops sites. And yes, they were tortured, but it's amazing how much training they did along with our war fighting training before we showed up in Yemen. In this boats operation, as they called it, from financing it, which that guy down in Gitmo is a financier and planner. He was, and this last group of testimony that we went down in December for, we've got DNA on this guy that he was in Yemen, in Aden, and he was leading El Badwe and some of the others who were boots on the ground leadership in building that boat. He was directing all that, testing the boat. Witnesses of these, they call them the Beach Boys, these young men, Yemeni men that saw him put it in and it sank the first time with all the explosives in it. So it's amazing, like I said, in the last half year to a year, what we finally are hearing after getting through all the bullshit with this prisoner of, his handcuffs are too tight, or he's not getting his, I mean, it was just ridiculous. All the delay stuff, but finally getting to the meat of all this so that we can get this thing to trial. So I just wanted to add that, looking at this picture, thinking about those workups like this one here. I believe this photo was when we were doing workups before we actually deployed.
Wow. Well, this is the aftermath. This is the port side of the ship, and where the bomb actually went off. A lot of people aren't familiar with DDGs, but that's just below the water line, is just below the mess, the mess line, or no, the mess decks, correct? And there's actually a hallway, a P-way right there, and and then the oil lab was right behind there, and then below that is main engine room 1, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
I'm drawing on 20 years of memory since I was on a DDG. Right. So
you're doing good. Yeah. As a matter of fact, if you look through that hole, which is 40 feet wide, doesn't look it, but believe me, it is, and it's 60 feet high. You do the math. That's an incredible amount of damage, and it didn't look like a lot because the skin was all folded in, but most of the damage was once they took all the skin away in Pascagoula in the shipyard. But the damage was incredible. But to the left there, like I said, forward is a cheese mess. They got blocked in. They were trapped. And then the galley, like you said, the mess line is directly through the center of that hole. And we had sailors standing there in line.
Right.
Some instantly killed, and some were thrown back and against the starboard bulkhead. So yeah, it was incredible. The energy from that blast was just incredible.
And I believe that only sailors can really grasp what your crew did and the leadership that was required. Unless you read Commander Leipold's book, what's it called? Front Burner, I think is what it's called. Good book. Really gets into depth on moment by moment as to what happened. But I don't think unless you're a sailor, you completely understand how the crew mobilized to do what they could in the chaos, right? And I'll just kind of put it into perspective. A lot of the times when you're pulling in, at least, especially back in the late 90s, early 2000s, prior to 9/11, it was very laid back. It was, hey, we're going through the motions. Safety was obviously paramount, but when you anchor a lot and you practice it over and over and over again, it becomes a little monotonous. It becomes something that we're doing it, right? So you had a lot of people in chow getting their meals because they knew they had watch later, and you really kind of become it becomes laissez-faire. It becomes very laid back, and the fact that people were able to find their wits about themselves, leaders, because many of the chiefs were in the chiefs mess, so you didn't have a lot of leadership at the E7 to E9. Well, except for yourself, there weren't a lot of chiefs on the deck plates, and people had to step up and do what they needed to do. And to me, as a sailor who's deployed 10 times and been through this evolution many, 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 many times, countless times, that to me is the amazing part. I don't know if I described it well enough. Over to you to kind of explain what the energy was like after that moment when the ship was lifted out of the water and dropped back in.
Obviously the first human reaction is that, we were taking on fuel, was that the fuel pod exploded, but we realized the explosion was on the opposite side of where we were refueling. But it was amazing how quiet everything was at first after that explosion. But then that's when the XO got on the IVIX and it was dead, and we realized something serious is going on. And Commander Peter Schmidt, who was our executive officer at the time, and the irony was that I was right near my GQ station, which was the aft battle dress station, and then there's a Petty Officer Garcia, DC-1 Garcia, who's retired senior chief now, but he was right near his repair party, also back aft. And bottom line is, XO said pass general quarters by word of mouth, because he knew something serious had happened. And then that's when, as I went around the corner to the opposite side of the ship, past the repair locker, there was already patients there, 20 plus injured, different kind of injuries, fractures, and people temporarily blinded from the blast. But the reports were obvious that we had taken a hit and that someone had attacked us. And so the SCAT team had already at that time manned up, which is a small caliber action team. I was busy, and Baby Doc had joined me. Her name was Tanika Campbell. It's Tanika Campbell Carlson. Now she lives here in Raleigh. But, here she is, a young 19-year-old hospital corpsman just starting out. And now she has these sailors' lives in her hands as I'm doing triage with her. And then, we got word that there was more seriously injured, obviously, towards the mess decks. And I told her, hey, you got to take over. We had done what we could, and the crew did a fabulous job of buddy aid and first aid, because, again, the training that we enforce every day in and out, which our sailors bitch about, but it was like riding a bike. And it was amazing, the dressings, the way they were applied, the way the patients were treated, or our COLE crew members were treated. But so I had to go ahead and go up top to the main deck, the deck up outside the barber shop. You probably remember where that is. on a DDG, and there's more sailors there in litters, and one of them was my chief's, Mark Darwin. He was one of the engineers, and he had fractured ribs and fractured clavicle, and helped to stabilize him. And then I had gotten word of mouth already by then that the XO had set up a makeshift tent out aft on the flight deck next to the helo tower, where they were putting patients. They were laying them out there because we had no room, obviously, in the skin of the ship. 3/4 of the ship had no power. Only one of the generators was working out of the three. All 4 main engines were offline. And as you said, the first of the 2 main machinery rooms was flooded out. And that's a good picture right there. Them later, the mudsuit divers would come from Norfolk to do damage assessment and body recovery as well if they could. But I wound up putting, like I said before, even in my speaking engagements, I wound up with the help of Lieutenant Phillips, who's now a retired Navy captain, and Doc Mosier, our actual IDC. 5 of our shipmates that day in body bags, including Chief Costello. Chief Costello just got pinned on.
He's a baby chief. I didn't know that. I didn't know that about him.
Yeah, he just pinned on that September.
Oh,
and a story I have with that I live with even today, because we were talking earlier before we started this show about my PTSD. Is I put Rich in a body bag, man, because Doc was still triaging. He was treating. I said I'd take care of Rich. He was up on the main deck by the missile deck where Doc had lost him doing CPR, and I had inventoried all his personal gear and took his wedding ring off, because that's what they taught us as corpsmen,
right?
And when you send the body back home. But to forward later, the captain voluntarily, and asked me to voluntarily do this, is to visit 33 families of the 17 lost sailors. I'm going to tell you, that was a rough day, man. Rough. I think it was almost 3 months on the road. But when we visited Rich Costello's wife, Charla, and he had 2 sons, she had told us that when they buried him in Arlington, they had to bury him without his wedding ring, because unfortunately the gear the stuff I'd taken off of him to include his ring and his watch, didn't get to her in time for he was buried. I'm gonna tell you, I broke down. I cried. I tell you, I'm holding it together now, but it still sticks with me today to think when I visit his grave alongside of Claude Felter and Gunn, that he's laying in the ground with no wedding ring. I can't put it no other way, man. It just sticks with you, and that's something I'll have to live with for the rest of my life. Palmer was killed next to my office. I mean, if I was in my office, brother, I wouldn't be sitting here. I've been the 18th casualty, no doubt. But to reiterate the 17, there's 2 others too that I count. So I actually personally tell people that there was 19, and who I include is first of all is EW2 Goku. He lost his he had a knee below knee amputation, and I had triaged him. Well, about 1.5 years later, he died in his sleep because he had TBI he was so close to the blast that he aspirated and died.
Oh, wow.
And then the other one was 1 year later, and I finally was at my next command. Jim Hurt was our MCPON then, and he wanted me to go to Washington. I said, no. I said, I'm not ready for anything like that. I said, I just would like to get out of the CMC program temporarily, decompress, and go back to the corpsman rate. And that way I'd be close to help, but be working in a hospital. So they asked me if I'd be willing to go to Sigonella and be the senior enlisted leader there. Absolutely. So when I had the job there, that's when a chaplain came to my office, and I knew something was up. And what happened was, like I said, a year later, Mark Hawkins, chief petty officer, slept over me. He was a gunner's mate, killed himself.
Oh,
So, and what I found out talking to some of my shipmates, especially in the mess, was that Mark was dealing with a divorce. His wife was using their kids against him. And then on top of that, he was injured. He's dealing with his injuries and trying to cope with what happened to him on Cole, with the incident. And he didn't get help. GM1 Roman, who I'd served with the SEALs before as spec op, with spec ops guys, we worked together on Cole again. He made chief. And so what they said was Mark had showed up to his celebration for pinning on his anchors. And then after that, he was staying with a buddy, and obviously because he was separated, stole his weapon and went out to a gun shack in Chesapeake and took his own life. So, and that's what I got into. What I told you earlier too is we're not Iron Men and women, and then we have to realize, we're human beings, and sometimes you have to admit that you need help, and you can do that privately. And I told you personally what I went through. I'm not going to get onto it here publicly, but it was a difficult path. But I'm here, and I'm alive, and I got my head on straight. We're human beings, and our minds are very complicated, and we're all programmed differently. And my recent experience with PTSD and our Navy dealing with psychological issues is the GW. My grandson was on it.
Oh, really?
And I was worried.
Yeah.
Especially when you had 9 deaths.
Yeah.
And the irony of it was, I also got to go to this last khaki, not khaki ball, but their pinning ceremony. Their CMC asked me to. And, when I got there, and I talked to the CMC offline, I said, you guys are still healing from this, aren't you? He said, yeah. And he says, not getting into the details, but it was, obviously a very difficult situation leadership wise. They had the sprint team, which is like Cole. We had the sprint team come there for that deal. It's a special psychiatrics, a rapid psychiatric team that comes in with a psychiatrist, psychologist, and nurses and corpsmen, and deal with the crew, because we had to send some of them back even on Cole because those young minds couldn't deal with the death and destruction. And they weren't going to help being there, sitting around, depressed. You know what I mean? It just becomes infectious.
Yes.
So we had them medevaced out of there for that reason.
Yes.
Because you need to have the strong minds and will to fight the fight to be there. I mean, that's life. That's the way it is,
And leadership has to dive in. And I'm not going to throw rocks. I promised myself after I retired, I wasn't going to throw rocks at leadership. But in general, like, I'm not throwing rocks at GW, and I don't know what they did. I'm not active duty. I don't have conversations daily with those leaders anymore. But from my own experience, when I was on Bataan, we lost a sailor same way. And you absolutely have to dive in. And I will tell you that this generation of sailor, if you don't dive in enough for them, it's not enough. So you have to dive in tenfold of what you think full-on engagement is. What you think full-on engagement is, it needs to be more, right? When you just think you're doing enough to reach out to people, to make connections, when you think you're doing enough, that's when you got to say, okay, what else can I do, and multiply it. It was the same thing during COVID when everyone was on lockdown. It was the same thing when we, post George Floyd, and during COVID, which was during George Floyd and the BLM movement. You, as a leader, regardless of who you are, you have to dive in, whether it be social movements or whether it be mental health issues. There has to be 10,000% engagement. That's his perspective on it, and that's my passionate plea that no,
you're right.
That they need it.
You're right. You got to hit it head on, because it'll just grow and get worse.
Right.
You've got to attack it, and you've got to be straightforward. They talk about transparency. Well, it's got to be more than that, man.
Right.
I'm telling you, what can be public needs to be public, and obviously you have to respect privacy as well.
Sure.
But I understand exactly what you're saying, and you're right on target.
Yeah.
Right on
Let
target.
me show. Well, I'm gonna go back to the slide.
I should have sent you the photo of her sitting on the stilts with the skin removed and the damage. Do you have that photo?
I no, the only one I have is when they towed her home.
Yeah.
And there,
I'm going to email you that later.
Okay, that'd be
so
great.
You'll have it. Okay.
Yeah, please. And then I really wanted. I showed this one. I wanted to show this picture because you and I talked about this prior to the show. The movement when I was at Recruit Training Command as the Command Master Chief was to really focus on the fact that every sailor is a firefighter and a damage controlman. And for those that don't know what this is the shaft seal going to the exterior of the ship on the back end of the ship, where the shaft goes out and actually turns the propeller and makes the ship move. And that is the shaft seal failure on board USS COLE post attack. And what that is basically wedges and, like you said earlier, James, basically anything you could get your hands on, oakum and other things, just shoved into that shaft seal to stop the leaking. If you hadn't, you would have lost the ship. It would have sunk.
Yeah, she would have been laying on her port side half sunk, no doubt. And what was incredible, the reports we got after she did get into Pascagoula to remove those main engines and all the damage was the shaft was actually bent. That's what caused that.
Wow.
And so that tells you again the tremendous amount of energy from that blast. And these bad guys were smart in what they used. What we learned in the trial was they used a combination of plastic explosives and TNT. And then on top of that, just like they did in Beirut, history repeating itself, they used oxygen tanks. So that would enhance the explosion. See, these guys pass on this information and learn from it how to make the cheapest explosive device with the most power and impact, and which it did in this case. But we almost lost the ship that night, 3 a.m. XO skipper getting everybody up, and that's in the book. It's called the Bucket Brigade. And we really did that. We were lined up bailing out an 8,500-ton ship, trying to save it. But you know what? That gets to that flag that we all talk about that's hanging up in Annapolis that says, "Don't give up the ship, D-Guts." I got that on the front of my truck. I'm going to tell you what, that will remain with me forever, because that's what a sailor should be all about. Until you have to, and absolutely do it, you do not give up your ship. And in this case, that happened, and we saved our ship and our shipmates. It was incredible.
I would argue that the power that was put into that bomb could not be matched by the power of those sailors. I mean, I get a little emotional and I'm a little over the top, but man, that's the heart and soul of a ship. That's the heart and soul of our country, are these people that can do something like this in the middle of, having a 40-foot hole torn in the side of their ship, and they save it over the course of a week and stay on board and sleep out on the missile deck and band together. I mean, it's breathtaking. It really is. And I know we're 23 years removed from this, but I'm going to argue that it may be a different generation today. The folks that are raising their right hand and joining are not your average people. They weren't the average people 20 years ago. They weren't the average people 30, 40, 50 years ago. They still aren't today. They are the exception to the exception. The folks that serve in uniform deserve that kind of respect. And that picture right there, to me, is the epitome of who they are. That's where I stand.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
And then I want to show one more picture, because I can't talk about the COLE without getting emotional and talking about my boy, Andrew Triplett. So this guy right here, I'll share this for my Tyco brothers and sisters that may catch this live, or maybe or might catch it on a replay. So my story about Andrew is we all have to get a pin. It's called an enlisted surface warfare pin. And Andrew was an engineer, and I was a combat systems topsider. The engineers are called snipes. It's a great story there, but I won't get into that right now. But they basically are in the pit all the time, and there's always a back and forth between the topsiders and the snipes. And to go down and get your book signed off and get your qualifications for your enlisted surface warfare, especially for a young sailor, is very intimidating. I go down into CCS, which is where engineering is controlled from, and there sits Andrew Triplett at the EPSI console with his feet up, with a smile on his face, and he basically asks me where his Mountain Dew is. And that's how I got my book signed off. I'd go down there with a Mountain Dew, and he'd sign my book off, and he taught me about the steam cycle. And then when I went to my board with a smile on his face and a smirk, he asked me the same thing, tell me about the steam cycle. What I would tell you is the lesson that I learned from Andrew Triplett was that it was never about the Mountain Dew. It was about coming down and having the guts to get my book signed. And I made him proud, man. I was a molecule of water. I came through the sea chest. I can't remember the exact cycle now, but I do remember his smile when I nailed that damn part of my board. And I do remember the standing ovation and all the people clapping for him as this new chief goes down the pier, because he was a brand new chief at that time, as he left the Tycho. I didn't even know he had been commissioned until after the attack on the Cole. So anyway, over to you about Andrew.
Yeah, that's when we got him. We got him when he was a newly commissioned officer and had the experience of the chief and went to the dark side, literally. But his famous sayings, and I remember the first time I saw him, he's coming out of the wardroom. This is all bullshit. Everything is just bullshit. And then there would be periods when I'm sitting in the chief's mess, and he'd come, because he was a Mustanger, he was a chief, so he's welcome in the mess. So he'd come in the mess. God damn it, Master, this is bullshit, man. I don't know what it was bullshit about, but he just had to let it out, man. But he was a straight shooter, and he really did, like I told you, he really brought a lot of reality into that wardroom. And I know that Kirk Lippold and the XO, Commander Peter Schmidt, both appreciated the fact that he did that because of his personality and the flavor that he brought in to that wardroom. It woke up those young new officers that just came out of the academy, and made things more real for them. But
and just another example of the exceptional leadership that time in service will cultivate, and he was one of them. And in my opinion, one of a kind. I know that there are guys from the Tycho that still mourn his loss to this day, and he's thought of often and will never ever be forgotten. So great man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I normally close out these conversations with one last word. Over to you, James, if there's something else you wanted to talk about or get after. I really do appreciate you being on, but over to you for the one last thing.
I just leave all those out there that are still serving as the fact that I appreciate that they wear the cloth of our nation, especially in these difficult times that we have today with our so-called friends in Russia and China, and we still have to worry about the war on terror and terrorists. So it's just a multi facet front, as I would say. I mean, there's so many different fronts we have to worry about, but the main thing is don't let politics get in the way. You raise your right hand to support and defend our Constitution, and that's the basics of what we do. Following the orders of our seniors, whether you think they're right or wrong. Sometimes, the one thing I've always passed, acceptance doesn't always mean agreement, but you got to keep your pie hole shut.
Amen.
At certain times. You got to be careful with that. And also, I think one thing I learned from Cole was, you have all those damn medals on your chest and anchors on your collar, but the medal we earned that day was a medal of life. I truly feel that every day you get up on your 2 feet and are able to live to the fullest and work with your shipmates out there and do your best in your command and by your division or your department and getting the mission done. When it comes to the end of the day and into your career, and you look back and can say you did the best you can for your family, because that's who you're protecting, not only our nation but your own family. That believe me, it will mean a lot when you sit in his and my seats, and you're a retiree or you're just out continuing your trade or your skill set in your life. So to all those out there, God bless, Godspeed on your journey.
Yeah. Again, thanks for coming on, James. It's been an honor having you. It's a great conversation, and we probably could go for a couple hours, but I know you got some stuff going on today.
Yeah,
and,
I got a Combat Motorcycle Association. I'm the secretary. I've got to get ready to go to that meeting. And I'm not riding my bike. It's too damn cold today. I'm four-wheeling it over there, man.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Up here, we won't be riding for another 2 or 3 months. So
yeah,
all the best to you. And I thanks for coming on, man. Just hang out. We'll chat at the end. I'm going to close this thing off right quick.
Roger that.
All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining me for another episode of Leadership Jam Session. This has been a little emotional for me, but I'm passionate about not just my time in service, but serving in general. So Motivate with is an extension of that. And that's what filling your cup up on a daily basis is about. It's not half empty. It's not half full, just waiting to be refilled. So get out there and refill it. If you want to support, I'd love for you to join, check out the shop. We're going to post that in the comments below, and, get your shirt that says, "Love you, mean it," because it's not just a slogan, it's a movement. So love you, mean it, get out, motivate. Have a good day.